Hi, this is John with Volusion Studios, and today I'm going to present a tutorial on how to create look-based selection for your next VR project inside of Unity. So this tutorial is actually based on a forum thread from the Oculus Creators Forum by the user CCS. It's an incredibly useful thread, and here this user actually gives you a download of a project file that you can go get and take a look at. There's sample code, which I'm actually using a little bit of in this tutorial. The project file is a little bit out of date with the current version of Unity, and there's some things that need to be fixed that you might run into. But in this particular tutorial that I've based this forum post off of, I'm using the latest version of Unity and the latest version, at least as of this date, of the Oculus SDK. And so even though I'm using the Oculus Rift for this particular project, you could use the Gear VR, or you could probably use any head-mounted display. The principles would still apply. But this is specifically for the Oculus SDK. So the version of Unity I'm using, let me just show you, is 5.1.1F1. I know there's some patch releases that are newer than this, but this is the latest download from the Unity website currently. And I am also using the current version of the Oculus runtime for Windows, which as of this recording is 0.6.0.1 beta, and I'm using the Oculus Mobile SDK. So you're going to want to have these two things downloaded to your computer. You're going to want to have the runtime installed, and you're going to want to have the SDK downloaded as well, because that's what we're going to use. So let me go ahead and show you what this looks like, what we're going to be creating here. So if I hit play inside of Unity, what we have, here's my head-mounted display showing up. If I was looking through my Oculus Rift here, I'd actually be seeing this in the Rift. But what I have is I have a cursor with a simple scene, and I have some buttons. And if I hover my cursor over a button, it counts down to 5, and then it moves an object to that button. So in this case, I hover over it, and it'll move the sphere there after 5 seconds. Okay, so that's what we're setting up. And you could use this for a number of different things. You could have this be for playing a video, for example. Hover over a button for a certain amount of time, and then it plays a video. Or hover over an enemy for a certain amount of time, and it deals them damage. Or really, you could have it do whatever you want. So that's what we're creating. So let's look at how to do it. So first off, if you are using the latest Oculus Mobile SDK, there is a bug with the current version of Unity that you're going to want to fix. The Oculus scripts are looking for some inputs that aren't set up by default when you import the project package. So let's look at importing the project package first. Let's pretend that this is just a blank scene. You can delete your default camera. I've left my default directional light in the scene, but you don't really need that if you just have UI elements. But what you're going to do is you're going to come to Assets, you're going to import package, custom package, and you're going to navigate to your mobile SDK. Here's my OVR Mobile SDK 0.6.0.1. Inside of there, go into VR Samples, Unity, and then Unity Integration, and just bring in Unity Integration, this package. And that's all you need. So once you've brought that into your blank scene, you're going to get a bunch of stuff. You're going to get this OVR folder, and you're going to get a plugins folder. Okay, and these are important to have. So once you have that, you need to go about setting up your inputs to deal with kind of this bug with the latest this SDK. So if you come down here to project settings to input, we need to add all of these desktop inputs because it's going to complain if we don't have them, which is really annoying. So a user here in the forums has actually fixed this for us. So if you come here to this particular URL or search for 0.60 error, input button is not set up, a user has actually created a new input manager asset that you can just download right here, and you can replace your default input manager asset and it will automatically populate these inputs for you, so you don't have to worry about them, and then you won't get complaining when you play this inside of your headset. So once you've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to come into our OVR folder, into the prefab section, and we have a player controller in here and we have a camera rig. So in this particular tutorial I'm using the player controller. If you don't need to move, you don't need a player controller. So in that case you would use the OVR camera rig. But if you want to move around, you need the player controller. So the player controller has the OVR camera rig in it. So once you've dropped this OVR player controller into your scene, what we're going to do is we're going to create another camera. So if you come up here to Game Object, Camera, and create a new camera, we're going to name that camera Look Camera. Okay? And this Look Camera, what we're going to use this for is we're going to use it basically to cast rays out into our scene and see if we are touching a button or not. So apparently the default OVR camera rig does not work, and we have to just use a regular Unity camera for this. So take that Look camera that you've created and we have to drop it under our virtual reality camera so that it moves in exactly the same way. So the way you'll do that is you'll open up your player controller, your OVR camera rig, and then under the center eye anchor you're going to drop your Look camera. Just parent it right under center eye anchor. And then you're going to make sure that your position is all zeroed out so that it's in the exact same position as the center eye anchor. And this will make that camera move in exactly the same way as your head-mounted display camera. So there's a couple other parameters we need to set on this camera. Make sure your position's at 0, but then make sure clear flags is set to don't clear. I think by default it's on Skybox. Set it to don't clear, and your culling mask set to nothing. The default is everything. So this is going to make sure that we don't actually use the camera. We're not actually going to look through the camera. We're just going to use it to cast rays, and we're actually going to use our OVR camera to actually view the scene. Okay? So once we have that, we're pretty much done with everything we need to do on the Oculus side of things. Now what we need to do is we need to just set up our scene. So we're going to create a UI, and you can do that by coming up here to Game Objects, UI, and create a panel. So once you create a panel, it will automatically create a canvas, and it will automatically create an event system. And we're going to use both those things. So on the canvas, the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that your event camera is set to your Look camera, and that your render mode is set to world space. Okay, we actually want this UI to exist inside of 3D space, not in screen space. Because if it was in screen space, it would be attached to your face when you're in virtual reality. So put it in world space, and then here in your event camera, set this to be your Look camera that we've created and parented under our OVR camera rig. You don't need to worry about any of these other slots on our canvas. The panel, you don't need to do anything special to either, but go ahead and create a couple of buttons. And those buttons are going to go on your canvas. So these buttons are really what hold the majority of the logic in this scene to make it work. So a couple of things to do. You can set the transforms however you want on these buttons. We don't need to look at the canvas renderer or the image, but what we do want to do under the button component is we want to set up a highlight color. And this is mostly just for debugging, to be able to tell that your button is actually working. So you won't be able to tell if it's actually highlighting unless you set a highlight color. So grab each of your buttons and set a highlight color. Set this to something nice and bright that you'll be able to see, and you'll know that it's highlighted. Okay? So that's what we're doing there. Set it back to green. So once you've set that on all your buttons, what we need to do next is we need to create a script. And this script is going to actually be the logic that drives what happens when we hover over a button. Okay? So go and create a new script. You can add a new component, new script, and we're going to create this new script that we're going to call button hover. And open up Mono Development, and then we're going to create this button hover script. So this is what the button hover script looks like. This is a script that I wrote. It's very simple, not much to it, but it contains the bulk of what makes this system work. So we have our default includes here, and we have a public class button hover. So everything is contained in this public class. Then we're going to create two variables. We're going to create a public int called time remaining. It is important that this be public because you might want to change it later in the editor, and I've set that to a default value of 5. So what this time remaining variable is this is how long we're going to hover over the button before it does something. The next variable is public game object, and I've called it ball. And all this is this is just really for the sake of debugging in this tutorial. What it's doing is it's actually moving these objects to the buttons. So what this allows me to do is if I select one of my buttons here and I look at my button script, let's close this event trigger real quick, you'll see I have the time remaining, and I can change that here in editor. So I could have different times over different buttons, which might be something that I want. But then I can change this to be whatever I want. In this case, I have it set to this capsule. But maybe instead of that capsule, I want it to be the sphere. So let's go ahead and come in here and let's grab our sphere. Let's find it. There it is. So I set it to the sphere. Okay? So that's what that's doing. The next thing in this script we have a function called countdown. And what this script is going to do is it's going to count down from our time remaining and then execute a function when we've reached 0. So all we do is we subtract 1 from time remaining. Okay? And here I'm just printing the remaining time. Then we say if time remaining is less than or equal to 0, do something. In this case, we're going to call this function called play video, because that's what I'm going to have my buttons actually do. So this function lives down here, and we'll look at it in a moment. But this will be whatever you want to happen after your countdown's over. Once your countdown's over and you've done whatever you're going to do, you're going to want to reset your timer. And you do that by do a cancel invoke on your countdown function and set the time remaining back to 5. And I've just printed here that I've reset the time. Okay? So what happens next, let's look at this function play video. So this is what happens when our countdown is finished. You can put whatever you want in here. In my particular function, I have print that I've finished counting, and then I'm going to go get my current position, which is the current position of my button, and set that to a new variable. It's a vector3 variable called new position. And then I take my ball object, whatever I passed in here, and I set its transform position to that new position. So this is what moves the ball to the buttons in my particular case. But you could have this play a video, you could have it kill an enemy, you could have it do whatever you want in this function. The next two functions are what actually look for the mouse events. So we have a public mouse over event, and it does have to be public. And then all we do in there is we call this invoke repeating, and we're going to call countdown once for every second. Okay? And that's what, I can't remember what these two are. One of them is how often to do it, and I can't remember what the other one is. But basically what this means is if our mouse is over the button, start calling countdown, this function here. Okay? So that's all that's happening when our mouse is over the button. We then have another public function called mouse out, and what this is going to do is if our mouse is not over the button, we're going to cancel our countdown, okay? And we're going to reset the time. So that's what those are doing. So if we look at this actually playing in the editor, and we look at our console here, and click on play, give it a second to come up. Let's get our health and safety warning off the screen. So if I hover over a button, you'll notice in my console it starts to print 4, 3, 2, 1, and then my sphere moves to the button. Hover over this one, 4, 3, 2, oops, I came off of it, 4, 3, 2, 1, and my sphere moves. If I'm hovering over it, it starts to count down, and I go off of it, it will stop the countdown. If I go on it again, it restarts from 5. Go off of it, it stops. So you have to hover over the button the whole time for however many seconds you say for your function to be executed. Okay, so that's our button script. So we need this script attached to every single button. Okay, so all you're going to do is you're going to come to add component, and you're going to make sure that script is attached, button hover. And then you can set the amount of time here, or the object in this particular tutorial here in this field. The next thing we need to do is we need to connect our functions to the actual mouse over events. And we do that with an event trigger. So come in here to add component, and you're going to choose event trigger. If you type it in, it'll show up, event trigger. And when you've created this event trigger, by default it won't have anything in it, and you'll click on add new event type. And then we're going to create a pointer enter and a pointer exit. So create those two, pointer enter and pointer exit. And once those are created, we need to fill some things out. So the first thing we need to do is we need to put an object in here. And in this particular case, we're going to put the object that we actually are using. So we're going to actually put button 2 as the object in this particular case. So if I come in here and I drag button 2 and I plop it in there, drag button 2, plop it in there, by default it's going to say no function over here. But if you click on this, you'll notice that because our script is attached to our button, we now have this button hover script in here, and we can access our functions that were made public, mouse out and mouse over. So when we are pointer entering our button, we want to call mouse over. When we are exiting our button, we want to come button hover, mouse out. Okay? So when our pointer enters the button, call button hover, mouse over. When our pointer exits the button, call button hover, mouse out. And you want to do this for every single button. Okay? So once you've done that, you've hooked almost everything up that you need. The last bit that we need is actually a script that I mentioned previously here on this forum thread. So CCS has provided us a script here called look input module, and what this look input module is going to do is it's basically going to control our cursor, and it's going to do the appropriate things to call these pointer exit and pointer enter events. Okay, and all this happens on the event system. So this was created when we created our canvas. And the things you're going to want to change from the default, you're going to want to turn off standalone input module, you're going to want to turn off touch input module, and then you're going to want to add a script. Okay, so go to add component, new script, and we're going to add this script called look input module. I would suggest that you just go here to this forum thread and just download the script or copy it right out of here. Okay, and it should just work as is. I've actually modified mine. I've gotten rid of a lot of parameters that I don't need and changed it a little bit. So mine will probably look a little bit different than yours will when you import it in. but you just want to make sure that this script is attached to your event system. And the only parameters in here that we really need to change from the defaults, just make sure use cursor is on. The cursor scale, you might need to change that depending on the scale of your scene. Scale cursor with distance, I think, is on by default. You want to keep that on. And then we want to put our cursor object in here. So we need to actually create a cursor object first. The cursor object is really simple to create. All it is, it's a UI. I think it's actually just a panel, if I'm not mistaken. And all I've done is in that panel I've added in an image so that it has a little X on it. So you can see I'm using this little Unity X check mark. I set the image type to filled. You are going to want to turn off the graphic raycaster script. So by default, if we expand this, it'll look like this. You're going to want to turn off the graphic raycaster. You don't want that one on. So actually, it doesn't even look like it's in there by default on the panel. Maybe it's not a panel UI element. It's one of those UI elements. I should actually delete this. I don't even need it. Let's remove that component. But the one thing you do want to change is make sure that on your canvas you have look camera put in here in your event camera. So you want to make sure that that's set. Set your cursor size in here to whatever you need it to be. And then we need to add one more script to this cursor called ignore raycast. And this is actually a script that comes with Unity. It's a very simple script. I can actually show you what it looks like. This ignore raycast script, this is all it is. And all it's doing is it's making the cursor be ignored by raycasts. So you can see we have our public class, and then we say, is the raycast location valid? If it is, just return false. So basically don't pay attention to the raycasts. Okay, so you need that added to your cursor. Once you have that added to your cursor, and you have your cursor plugged in to your event system cursor here, so you'll just add that in, cursor, you're all ready to go. Your scene should be all up and working, and you should be able to hit play, and in your head-mounted display you should be able to view your scene. Let's get rid of that warning. Oh, you can see I accidentally left that panel attached to the camera there. Let's actually get rid of that. I accidentally created it inside my camera, which I don't want that. Let's try this one more time. That's exactly what would happen if you kept your UI in screen space. It would be like the UI was attached to your face, which you don't want. Okay, so here we go. So here's my cursor. You can hover over the buttons, and after 5 seconds, boom, it moves the sphere to the button. Boom. And like I said, you can change this. We have this in our variable here. If I wanted to set this to 2 seconds, if I wanted to set this one to 1 second, I could do that. And now when I play, those buttons will have different times associated with them. So 1 second, this will be 2 seconds, 1, 2, and this one will still be 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's it. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. Leave a comment if I did, if something's not working, and I'll try and do a follow-up video or answer the question in the comments. But I hope this was useful to you.